The call came at 4:17 on a Tuesday afternoon, and I remember the exact time because one sentence from my son changed the rest of my life. "Dad, it's Poppy. She fell. She's in surgery." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. My granddaughter was 7 years old. The little girl who sent me pictures of every flower she found, who called me every Sunday morning just to tell me about her week, was lying in a hospital fighting for her life. Please, before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you are listening from today. My name is Holden Marquetti. I was 68 years old when I learned that the worst kind of pain does not always come from losing someone. Sometimes it comes from realizing someone failed the person you would have protected with your own life. I built my company from a single warehouse into a national logistics business. But none of that mattered when I heard fear in my son's voice. Theo was not someone who panicked. He was calm, practical, and always in control. That was why I knew something was terribly wrong. "Where are you?" I asked. "The hospital," he answered. "Where is Poppy's mother?" The silence that followed told me everything before his words did. "Dad, she's not here." I stood up from my desk. "What do you mean she's not there?" "She's away." "Away where?" My son hesitated. Then he said the words that made my blood run cold. "She's in the Caribbean." My granddaughter was undergoing emergency surgery, and the woman who was supposed to be caring for her was thousands of miles away. I grabbed my phone and my keys. I did not ask another question. There are moments in life when a person does not think. They move. This was one of those moments. I had my plane ready as quickly as possible. The entire flight, one thought kept repeating in my mind. How does a child end up alone when she has a family that loves her? When I called Theo again, he sent me one message. "Surgery. 4 hours minimum. Don't call." I stared at those words for a long time. My son had never been a person who sent incomplete messages. He was sitting somewhere outside an operating room, watching doctors fight to save his daughter, and he did not have enough strength to write anything else. When I arrived at the hospital, I found him sitting alone in the pediatric waiting area. He looked exhausted. His clothes were still stained from the accident. His eyes looked like he had not blinked in hours. When he saw me, he stood up and hugged me. Neither of us spoke. A father should never have to watch his child suffer. And a grandfather should never have to see his grandchild lying behind a hospital door. The doctor finally came out later that night. Poppy had suffered a serious head injury and required emergency surgery. The operation was successful, but the next few days would be critical. I walked into her room and saw my little girl lying there surrounded by machines. Her hair was partially shaved. Her small hand rested on the blanket. Around her wrist was the hummingbird bracelet I had given her for her birthday. She loved hummingbirds because she said they reminded her of the grandmother she never had enough time to know. I sat beside her bed and held her hand. I told her she was not alone. I told her Grandpa was there. And then I made a promise. Not a promise made from anger. A promise made because someone needed to answer for what happened. "I will find out what happened to you," I whispered. The next morning, I started asking questions. The first question was simple. Why was Poppy alone? The second question was harder. Why was Sloane, the woman who always said she loved this child, nowhere near her when she needed her most? I knew there was something I did not understand. And when I discovered where Sloane had really been, I realized my granddaughter's accident was only the beginning of something much darker. The first thing I did after leaving Poppy's hospital room was not confront Sloane. A lot of people expect anger to come first. They imagine a grandfather shouting, demanding answers, looking for someone to blame. But anger is loud, and loud people make mistakes. I had spent my entire life building a company by solving problems, not by reacting to them. So I did what I knew how to do. I found the facts. I called Dean Furlan, the head of my personal security team. Dean had spent more than 2 decades working in diplomatic security before joining me. He was not someone who asked unnecessary questions. He understood that when I called him in the middle of the night, something serious had happened. "I need to know where Sloane is," I told him. "And I need to know everything about why she is there." Less than 30 minutes later, my phone rang. Dean's voice was calm, but there was something different in it. "Holden, I found her. I stood in the hospital hallway. Where? St. Lucia. For a moment, I said nothing. Explain. Dean continued. She is on a private charter yacht leaving Rodney Bay Marina. The boat is a luxury vessel with a full crew. My hand tightened around the phone. My granddaughter was unconscious in a hospital bed, and her stepmother was relaxing on a yacht thousands of miles away. But then Dean said the words that changed everything. She is not alone. I closed my eyes. Who is with her? There was a short pause. A man named Renzo Castellaro, 31 years old. He is listed as her tennis instructor. I felt something inside me become very still, not because I was surprised, because suddenly, pieces that did not make sense started connecting. Sloane's distance. The way she always seemed more interested in appearances than family. The way she talked about security and comfort more than love. But I did not let myself jump to conclusions. A wise man does not punish people based on feelings. He punishes them based on facts. How certain are you? I asked. Dean answered immediately. Credit card records, flight information, marina records, photos from the dock. Then he added one more detail. There is a picture of Renzo wearing a watch that belongs to your son. I looked toward the hospital room where Theo sat beside Poppy. My son had lost his first wife years earlier. He had already experienced the kind of pain most people never recover from, and now the person he trusted to help him raise his daughter was somewhere else with another man while his child fought for her life. But I still did not call Sloane. Not yet. Because I needed to understand everything. I asked Dean to pull every record available. Phone history, financial activity, travel records, credit card usage, anything that showed a pattern. Then I called Margulis Chenoweth, my attorney. She had represented me for nearly 30 years. She was not the kind of lawyer who made empty threats. She built cases. When I explained what we knew, she was silent for a moment. Holden, are you sure you want to move this quickly? She asked. Yes. Why? I looked through the hospital window at Poppy sleeping. Because my granddaughter does not get a second chance if we are too slow. Margulis understood immediately. She began preparing the legal steps. Divorce filings, asset protection, investigation requests. But she also reminded me of something important. Do not confront Sloane without proof. Let her believe she is safe. I knew she was right. People reveal themselves when they think nobody is watching. That night, while Theo sat beside his daughter's bed, I reviewed everything Dean had sent me. Sloane had boarded the yacht 3 days earlier. 3 days. 3 days while Poppy was in that house. 3 days while my son believed his family was safe. Then I found another detail. The timing. Sloane did not leave after the accident. She left before it happened. That meant this was not someone running away after making a mistake. This was someone who had already chosen to be somewhere else. I looked at the photographs again. The yacht, the smiling faces, the woman who had promised to love my granddaughter. I felt anger, but beneath that anger was something stronger. Determination. Because now, I was no longer trying to understand where Sloane had gone. I was trying to understand why she was willing to leave. And I knew the answer would be buried somewhere deeper than an affair. There was a reason she chose that weekend. There was a reason she left Poppy behind. And before I was finished, I intended to find it. I kept looking at the photographs Dean sent me, but the more I looked, the more I realized something important. Sloane did not become dangerous the day Poppy fell. That day only revealed what had been hidden for years. To understand what happened, I had to go back to the beginning. Before Sloane entered our family, Theo was a different man. My son had always been strong. He was calm, responsible, and the kind of person others depended on. But losing Emma changed him. Emma was Poppy's biological mother, and when she died after a long battle with cancer, Theo lost more than a wife. He lost the future he thought he would have. I watched my son struggle to get through ordinary days. He would wake up, take care of Poppy, go to work, and come home exhausted. He was trying to be both parents at once, and Poppy was only 3 years old. That was the part that hurt the most. A little girl needed stability, and Theo was terrified he would never be enough for her. I remember sitting with him after Emma's funeral. He looked at me and said something I will never forget. "Dad, I don't know if I can do this alone. As a father, there are moments when you would do anything to remove your child's pain." But I couldn't take his grief away. I could only stand beside him. 11 months later, Theo met Sloane at a charity event I sponsored. She was confident, charming, and knew exactly how to make people feel seen. She told Theo that she understood loss. She said she had lost her own mother young. She said Poppy needed someone who could give her love and stability. At the time, I wanted to believe her. I wanted my son to be happy again. I wanted Poppy to have a woman in her life who cared about her. Looking back now, I realize how much I wanted that story to be true. Because sometimes the things we hope for can make us ignore what is right in front of us. There were small moments I noticed, things that bothered me, but never seemed serious enough to confront. Sloane was always interested in the lifestyle that came with our family. The homes, the vacations, the connections. She asked questions about things that had little to do with getting to know us, and more to do with understanding what we had. But then she would spend an afternoon reading to Poppy or making dinner, and I would tell myself I was being unfair. I was judging someone who was trying to become part of our family. That was my mistake. I was not wrong because I trusted her. Trust is not a weakness. The mistake was ignoring the small signs because I wanted the best possible outcome. Theo married Sloane 4.5 years ago. I paid for the wedding because I wanted my son to have a fresh beginning. I remember Sloane's speech that night. She stood in front of everyone and talked about how safe she felt with the Marquetti family. That word stayed with me. Safe. Not loved. Not happy. Safe. At the time, I thought it was just a strange choice of words. Now I wonder if she had been telling us who she really was all along. Someone looking for security. Someone looking for a place to land. Someone who saw our family not only as people, but as protection. But even then, I never imagined this. I never imagined she would leave a 7-year-old child alone for days. I never imagined she would choose a luxury yacht over a hospital room. And I never imagined that the woman who promised to love Poppy would become the person I needed to investigate. I looked at the evidence again and felt something change inside me. This was no longer about discovering whether Sloane made a terrible choice. It was about discovering whether every choice she made had been leading to something bigger. Because people do not usually destroy their own family by accident. They do it when they believe they have something to gain. And I was determined to find out exactly what Sloane thought she was going to get. I had spent my life believing accidents happen because people made mistakes. A missed warning. A bad decision. A moment of carelessness. But what I discovered about Poppy's balcony made me question everything I believed. Because accidents leave behind confusion. Plans leave behind patterns. And once we started looking closer, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The first question was simple. Why did the balcony fail? Theo had mentioned the railing before. Not once. Not casually. He had told Sloane several times that it needed to be checked. According to Theo, Sloane always had the same answer. I already handled it. That sentence stayed with me. Because when someone says they handled something, you naturally stop looking. You trust them. You move on. That is what families do. They trust each other. But trust becomes dangerous when the wrong person knows how to use it. I asked Dean to find every record connected to the house. Repairs, contractors, permits, payments. Anything that could tell us what happened before Poppy fell. The first report came back less than a day later. There was no repair permit. No licensed contractor. No official work order. Nothing. The repair Sloane claimed had happened did not exist. I stared at the report for several minutes. Because one possibility was already becoming clear. Sloane had not failed to repair the balcony. She had lied about repairing it. But I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. Dean sent an investigator and structural engineer to the house in Tacoma. They examined every part of the balcony, every piece of metal, every connection, every bolt. I waited in the hospital hallway while they worked. Theo sat beside Poppy's bed. He had barely slept since the accident. He kept holding his daughter's hand, as if letting go for even a second might somehow make things worse. I watched my son and felt something I had not felt in years. Helplessness. Money could solve many problems. Influence could open many doors. But none of those things could guarantee that a child you loved would wake up. Then Dean called. His voice was different, more serious than before. "Holden, you need to hear this." I stood up and walked away from Theo so he would not see my reaction. "Tell me." The balcony was not properly repaired. I closed my eyes. "What does that mean?" There was a pause. "It means someone removed 2 of the original support bolts and replaced them with shorter bolts that were not designed to hold the weight." For a moment, I could not speak. I looked through the hospital window at Poppy, lying in that bed. A 7-year-old child, fighting because someone had made a choice. Not a mistake, a choice. "Are you certain?" I asked. "The engineer is certain. The damage pattern is consistent with deliberate tampering." My hand tightened around the phone. I had spent decades dealing with people who tried to hide the truth behind paperwork, excuses, and carefully prepared stories. But this was different. This was my granddaughter. "Who did it?" I asked. "We don't know yet," Dean replied. "But we found something else." I waited. The tools used match a specific type of cordless drill. "We are checking purchase records." I looked back at Theo. He was still sitting beside Poppy, unaware that the story had just changed forever. Until that moment, we believed Sloane had made a selfish decision. We believed she had left a child unsupervised while she went on a trip. That alone was unforgivable. But this was something else. This meant someone might have prepared for something to happen. The difference between neglect and intent is a line that changes everything. I called Margolis immediately. "We need to move faster," I said. She understood from my voice that something had changed. "What happened?" The balcony was not an accident. There was silence. Then her voice became quiet. "Holden, are you saying someone did this deliberately?" "I'm saying we need to find out." That was the truth. I refused to let anger replace evidence. Anger could tell me someone was guilty. Only proof could show who. But deep inside, I already knew something terrible. Sloane's disappearance. The lies about the repair, the timing, the missing contractor records. They were no longer separate pieces. They were becoming one story. And if that story was true, then Poppy had not simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Someone had created the danger around her. The next question was the one I feared most. Who would want to hurt a 7-year-old child? And what did they believe they would gain by doing it? I had learned one thing throughout my life. When emotions are high, people make mistakes. That was true in business. It was true in investigations. And it was especially true when someone believed they were about to lose everything. I wanted answers. I wanted Sloane to explain why my granddaughter was lying in a hospital bed. I wanted to hear her say she was sorry. But wanting something and needing something are 2 different things. What I needed was proof. Proof that would survive a courtroom. Proof that nobody could twist into another story. So I called Margolis. "We need to move carefully," I told her. She understood immediately. "What changed?" she asked. The balcony wasn't an accident. There was silence on the line. Margolis had represented me for decades. She knew my voice. She knew when I was angry, and she knew when I was certain. "Holden," she said quietly, "are you telling me someone may have intentionally harmed a child?" "I'm telling you we need to prove exactly what happened." That was the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge acts on emotion. Justice requires patience. I also called Dean. I wanted everything connected to Sloane investigated, not rumors, not assumptions, facts. Her finances, her travel records, her communications, her relationship with Renzo. Every piece mattered, because people who create complicated lies always leave behind small pieces of the truth. While Theo stayed beside Poppy, I worked. I hated leaving him alone emotionally, but I knew someone had to think clearly. My son was a father watching his daughter fight for her life. I was a father protecting both of them. The first thing we did was protect Poppy's future. I had created a trust for her years earlier. Theo did not even know the full details because I wanted it protected until she was older. The trust was not controlled by Sloane. It was not something she could access through marriage. It was designed for one purpose, to protect my granddaughter. When Margulis reviewed everything, she found another problem. Sloane was listed on several family-related accounts and documents connected to Theo. "We need to separate her access immediately," she said, "before she realizes what is happening." I agreed. The next steps happened quietly. Legal filings were prepared. Financial protections were put in place. Investigators continued working, but the most important decision was one I made personally. We would not tell Sloane what we knew. Not yet. "Why?" Theo asked when I explained. His voice was exhausted. He wanted answers. He wanted his wife to face what she had done. I understood. But I also understood people. Because guilty people behave differently when they think they are safe. Theo looked at me. "You think she'll make another mistake?" I nodded. "I think she already has. We just need to find it." That night, Dean sent me the first financial report. It showed something interesting. Sloane's spending had increased significantly over the previous year. Luxury purchases, travel expenses, private lessons, expensive restaurants. None of that proved anything by itself. A person is allowed to enjoy their own money. But when those expenses are combined with lies, missing information, and a child left alone, patterns start appearing. Then came the phone records. Sloane had been communicating with Renzo far more often than she admitted. Messages, calls, conversations late at night, conversations during times she claimed she was caring for Poppy. I looked at those records and felt a familiar stillness return. The same feeling I had when I first built my company. The moment when confusion disappears and the path forward becomes clear. Sloane thought she was hiding behind distance. She thought being on a yacht in another country meant nobody could reach her. She was wrong. The world had become much smaller than people like her realized. By the next morning, we had enough to begin protecting ourselves. But we still did not know the full reason behind everything. That was the question I could not ignore. Why would someone risk destroying their family? Why would someone leave a child alone? Why would someone create a dangerous situation and then disappear? The answer was not just anger. It was not just selfishness. People do terrible things when they believe the reward is worth the risk. And I was determined to find out what Sloane thought she was going to gain. Because once I knew that, I would know exactly how far she was willing to go. I have always believed that the most effective consequences are not created through anger. They are created when someone finally has to face the reality of their own decisions. Sloane believed she was untouchable. She believed distance protected her. She believed a luxury yacht, a new country, and a few carefully prepared lies could keep her safe. She was wrong. By Wednesday morning, the first protections were in place. The accounts connected to Theo and Sloane were frozen pending investigation. Access to family assets was removed. Legal notices were prepared. Every step was done quietly. No warnings, no threats, no dramatic phone calls. Just paperwork moving through the right channels. That was what people like Sloane never understood. Real power does not need to announce itself. It simply changes the situation while everyone else is still pretending nothing is happening. Meanwhile, Sloane was still on the yacht in St. Lucia. At first, she did not realize anything was wrong. She ordered food. She booked activities. She continued living as if she had simply taken a break from a life she believed belonged to her. Then the first card declined. She tried another one. Declined. Then another. The confusion began. According to Dean's report, Sloane became frustrated. She called the bank. She demanded answers. But the bank did not give her the information she wanted. They simply told her the accounts were under review. That was the moment reality started reaching her. For years, Sloane had depended on appearances. She depended on people believing the version of herself she presented. The loving wife. The caring stepmother. The woman who sacrificed everything for family. But when money disappeared, that image became harder to maintain. Then Renzo started changing. Dean's team monitored the situation from a distance. They watched as Renzo began making his own calls. He was no longer acting like a man enjoying a romantic vacation. He was acting like someone looking for an exit. That told me something important. People who are loyal when everything is easy often disappear when consequences arrive. Renzo had enjoyed the benefits of Sloane's choices, but he had no interest in carrying the weight of them. I received updates throughout the day. Each one added another piece to the picture. Sloane attempted to contact Theo repeatedly. She called him again and again. She sent messages. She left voicemails. The tone changed with every attempt. First it was concern, then confusion, then frustration, then fear. But Theo never answered. Not because he was being cruel, because for the first time he was seeing the truth without Sloane controlling the conversation. He was sitting beside his daughter. The only person who mattered in that moment was Poppy. Later that afternoon, Margulis called me. "Holden, there is something else you need to know." I listened carefully. She had found additional financial activity connected to Sloane. Expenses that did not match the lifestyle she claimed to have. Travel arrangements, luxury purchases, payments that showed a pattern. None of it alone was enough. But, combined with everything else, it painted a picture. Sloane had not simply made one terrible decision. She had been living a life built around secrets. "What about Renzo?" I asked. Margulis paused. "Dean is still investigating, but it appears he may be less involved than Sloane." I understood what that meant. When pressure arrived, everyone would start protecting themselves. And that was when the truth usually came out. By Thursday morning, Sloane's world looked very different. The yacht that once represented freedom had become a place where she was trapped with no access to the life she expected. The people she thought she controlled were no longer answering. The money she assumed would always be available was gone. The man she chose over her family was looking for a way out. But I still was not satisfied. Because losing money was not the punishment. Losing comfort was not the justice. The real question remained unanswered. Why did Sloane leave Poppy alone? Why did she choose that exact weekend? Why did she lie about the balcony repair? Those answers were still hidden, and I knew that once we found them, we would understand the one thing that mattered most. Whether Sloane had simply been careless, or whether she had planned everything from the beginning. The money was disappearing. The lies were falling apart. But there was still one question I could not answer. What was Sloane's real motive? People do not risk their marriage, their reputation, and their entire future for nothing. There had to be something she believed was worth the risk. Dean continued digging. He reviewed financial records, communications, and every connection Sloane had made over the previous years. Then one afternoon, he called me with information that changed the entire direction of the investigation. "Holden, I found something." I stepped away from Poppy's hospital room before answering. "Tell me." "Sloane has been asking questions about family assets for a long time." I felt my jaw tighten. What kind of questions? Inheritance, property ownership, trust structures. I closed my eyes. Suddenly, everything became clearer. Sloane had never only been interested in comfort. She had been studying the foundation of our family. The things we owned. The things she thought she could access. "Keep going," I said. Dean explained that Sloane had spoken several times about the future. She had asked questions about what would happen to Theo's assets. She had asked about Poppy's financial security. She had asked about how family wealth was protected. None of those conversations alone proved a crime. A person can ask questions. A person can be curious. But when those questions appear beside a neglected child, a false repair, and a secret affair, they become something different. They become a pattern. Then Margulis found something even more important. The trust I created for Poppy years earlier. Sloane did not know the details. She only knew there was significant money connected to my granddaughter. And based on the information we found, she seemed to believe that marriage gave her more control than it actually did. That was her mistake. A very expensive mistake. The trust was designed specifically to protect Poppy. It was not controlled by Theo. It was not controlled by Sloane. It was protected from exactly the kind of situation we were facing. When I heard that, I sat quietly for a long time. Because suddenly I understood the possibility that had been sitting in front of us. Sloane may not have only been running away from responsibility. She may have believed she was moving toward a reward. I looked through the hospital window at Poppy, sleeping. A child who had done nothing wrong. A little girl who trusted the adults around her to keep her safe. The thought that someone could look at that child and see an obstacle instead of a person was almost impossible to accept. But the evidence was leading somewhere. And I had learned long ago not to ignore where evidence leads. "What happens if Poppy doesn't survive?" I asked Margulis quietly. She did not answer immediately. She knew why I was asking. "Holden," she said carefully, "we need to be very careful with conclusions." I understood. We could not accuse someone based on a theory. We needed facts. But I also knew something else. Motive changes how you view every action that came before it. The balcony, the trip, the lies, the missing nanny, the fake repair. They were no longer isolated events. They were pieces of a much bigger picture. Later that evening, I sat beside Theo. He looked exhausted. "Dad," he said quietly, "why would she do this?" That was the question every father fears hearing from his son. Because sometimes the truth is more painful than the lie. "I don't know yet," I answered. "But we are going to find out." Theo looked at me. What if she really did this? I knew what he meant. What if his wife, the person he trusted with his daughter, was capable of something unforgivable? I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Then she will answer for it." I did not say it with anger. I said it with certainty. Because justice is not about making someone suffer. It is about making sure they cannot hurt anyone else. By the end of that day, we had something we did not have before. A possible motive. Sloane had not simply made a selfish choice. She had been asking questions about what she could gain. And the more we uncovered, the more one terrifying possibility became impossible to ignore. Poppy's accident may not have been the event that destroyed Sloane's plan. It may have been the event that exposed it. And now I needed to find the final piece of evidence that would prove exactly what she had done. I had spent days gathering evidence, protecting my family, and making sure every step we took was based on facts. But there was one thing I still wanted. I wanted Sloane to look at me and understand that she had failed. Not because I destroyed her, not because I took something from her. She failed because the truth had survived everything she tried to hide. By Saturday morning, Sloane was being held in St. Lucia while the legal process moved forward. Dean informed me that I could request a supervised meeting. I did not hesitate. I needed to see her. Not because I wanted to yell, not because I wanted an apology. I wanted to know if there was any part of the woman who sat at my family table for years that understood what she had done. When I walked into the small room, she looked nothing like the confident woman who boarded that yacht. Her hair was messy. Her clothes were the same ones she had worn days earlier. The expensive lifestyle was gone. The image was gone. Only the person remained. The moment she saw me, her face changed. "Holden," she said, standing quickly. "Thank God you're here." I said nothing. She grabbed the opportunity immediately. "There has been a terrible misunderstanding. I need you to listen to me." I sat across from her. "I'm listening." She started crying. "I love Poppy. I would never hurt her. You know that." I looked at her carefully. "Do I?" She froze for a moment. Then she continued. "Renzo was a mistake. I was unhappy. I made bad choices. But this was never about Poppy." That sentence told me everything. She was still trying to separate her actions. Still trying to make each piece look unrelated. The affair was one thing. The trip was another. The balcony was another. But the truth was that they were all connected. "You left a 7-year-old child alone for 3 days, I said. Her expression changed. I thought someone was there. "You fired the nanny. I thought Sloane would handle it. You told Theo the balcony was repaired." She looked away. That was the first real crack. I trusted someone to fix it. There was no contractor. Silence. There was no permit. No repair. No invoice. Her breathing became faster. I continued. "Only a balcony with missing support bolts." Sloane looked at me. "You think I did that?" I leaned forward slightly. "I think the evidence is going to answer that question." She started shaking her head. "Renzo was the one who pressured me. He told me things would work out. He said Theo would never find out." There it was. The first attempt to move the blame. I expected it. "So now Renzo is responsible?" I asked. "He told me what to do. Did he buy the tools?" She stopped. I watched her face carefully. Did he buy the drill? No answer. Did he go into the house? Silence. Did he remove the bolts? Her eyes dropped. That was enough. A person can control their words. They can prepare explanations. But silence tells the truth faster than people realize. I placed the evidence folder on the table. Inside were photographs, records, purchase information. Everything connected. Sloane stared at it. "You took everything from me," she whispered. I looked at her. "No. I protected what was never yours." Her eyes filled with anger. "You don't understand. I had nothing." I shook my head. "You had a family. You had a child who trusted you. You had a husband who loved you. You had people who welcomed you into their home." My voice stayed calm. "You had everything that mattered. You just decided it wasn't enough." For the first time, she stopped trying to convince me. The confidence disappeared. The excuses disappeared. There was only fear. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. I looked at her. "Now you answer questions from people who are not trying to believe your story." Before I left, she said one final thing. "Holden, I never wanted Poppy to get hurt." I stopped at the door. I wanted to believe that sentence. I really did. Because accepting that someone could intentionally harm a child is something no family wants to face. But wanting something to be true does not make it true. I turned back. "Then you should have protected her when you had the chance." And I walked away. Outside, Dean was waiting. "How did it go?" he asked. I looked back at the building where Sloane was being held. "She still thinks this is about losing money." I paused. "She doesn't understand yet that she lost the only thing she could never buy back." "What's that?" Dean asked. I answered without hesitation. "The trust of the people who loved her." The investigation was not finished. The court case had not started, but Sloane had finally learned the one thing she had spent months trying to avoid. She was no longer controlling the story. The truth was, and the truth was coming for everything she had built. The truth moved faster than Sloane expected. Once the evidence was complete, there was no longer a story she could control. There were only facts. The investigators had the records. The engineers had the evidence from the balcony. The financial documents showed the pattern. The communication records showed the choices she made before and after the accident. Sloane had spent years creating an image of herself as someone who cared about family. But when that image was removed, what remained was a series of decisions that hurt the people who trusted her most. The charges became more serious as investigators continued looking into everything. What started as a case involving child neglect became something much larger. The damaged balcony, the false repair claims, the circumstances surrounding Poppy being left alone. Every piece added another layer to the truth. Renzo was the first person to realize the situation was bigger than he could handle. He had enjoyed the benefits of Sloane's choices, but he had no desire to carry the consequences. When investigators approached him, he decided to cooperate. He provided information about Sloane's actions, their relationship, and conversations that helped explain what happened. It did not erase his responsibility, but it revealed something important about people who make bad choices together. When everything falls apart, many of them stop protecting each other. They start protecting themselves. Sloane, who once believed she had everything under control, suddenly had nothing left to control. The money was gone. The relationship was over. The people who once defended her were silent. The family that welcomed her no longer wanted her near them. But the most important thing to me was not seeing Sloane lose. It was seeing Poppy come home. The first time I saw her walk through our front door after leaving the hospital, I had to turn away for a moment. Not because I was sad, because I was overwhelmed. She was smaller than before, more careful, but she was alive, and that was the only thing that mattered. Theo changed after everything happened. He carried guilt. He kept asking himself how he missed the signs, how he trusted the wrong person, how he allowed someone into his daughter's life who could hurt her. I told him something every father needs to hear sometimes. Son, you were not foolish because you loved someone. The person who betrayed that love is the one responsible. Healing did not happen overnight. Poppy had nightmares. Some sounds made her nervous. Some nights she would wake up and ask if she was safe. Every time, Theo was there. Every time, I was there. We reminded her of the same thing. She was loved. She was protected. She was home. We eventually removed the damaged balcony completely. Theo wanted to sell the house because every corner reminded him of what happened. But I told him something I believed. Don't let the person who hurt you take another thing from you. So, we rebuilt. Not just the balcony. The home. We changed the space. We created new memories. Poppy's room became her favorite place. She had a window seat where she could watch birds outside. Months later, she told me she wanted to name one of the hummingbirds that visited the yard. She called it Stella. I asked her why. She simply shrugged. Because it looks happy. Children have a way of finding light after the darkest moments. The legal process continued, but our family was already beginning to recover. Sloane had lost the life she built on lies. But we were rebuilding a life based on truth. That was the difference. Looking back, I understand something now. Justice is not about watching someone suffer. It is about stopping the harm and protecting the people who still need you. Sloane made choices. She planted every seed herself. The consequences were simply what grew from them. And while she faced the results of her actions, Poppy was learning something much more important. That even after the worst days, love can still find its way back home. The months after Sloane was exposed were not about revenge. They were about rebuilding what she almost destroyed. The legal process continued, but for me the most important victory was not watching Sloane lose. It was watching my family heal. Poppy came home slowly. Her body recovered before her heart did. Some nights, she woke up frightened. Some sounds reminded her of the accident. But every time she opened her eyes, Theo was there. I was there. We reminded her of the same truth. She was safe. She was loved. She would never be alone again. Theo changed after everything happened. He carried guilt that was not his to carry. He kept asking himself how he missed the signs and how he trusted the wrong person. One evening while we sat together, he looked at me and asked, "Dad, how did you know something was wrong?" I thought about the question carefully. The answer was not because I was smarter than everyone else. It was because life had taught me to pay attention. People reveal themselves through their actions, I told him. Listen to what they say, but watch what they do when they think nobody is watching. Theo looked down and whispered, "I should have known." I shook my head. No, son. Loving someone does not make you foolish. Trusting someone does not make you weak. The person who breaks that trust is responsible for breaking it. Months later, we rebuilt the house. We removed the damaged balcony completely and created a safer space for Poppy. She got a small window seat where she could watch the birds outside. She still loved hummingbirds. Every time one appeared near the garden, she smiled and said it was Grandma saying hello. I never corrected her. Some things do not need proof to be meaningful. Looking back, I learned something I will carry for the rest of my life. Family is not protected by ignoring problems. Family is protected by having the courage to face them. A kind heart is important, but it must walk beside a careful mind. You can forgive someone and still understand they cannot be trusted with your life anymore. You can love your family and still stand against someone who tries to harm it. I am 68 years old. Some people believe age makes a person weaker and easier to fool. They are wrong. Age gives you experience. It teaches you patterns. It teaches you that the smallest details often reveal the biggest truths. Sloane thought she was dealing with an old man who would stay silent. She thought patience meant weakness. She was wrong. I was patient because I was protecting my family. I was quiet because I was gathering the truth. Today, I watch Poppy laugh again. I watch Theo become stronger. I remember everything we lost, but I also remember everything we saved. If there is one lesson I want people to remember, it is this. Pay attention to the people you love. Notice the small changes. Listen when someone feels afraid. Protect the ones who cannot protect themselves. Because sometimes the person everyone underestimates is the person who has the strength to save everyone when it matters most.